So welcome everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and this is one of the sort of first kind of webinars we've really done about our activity. As Jerry says, Community Climate Action has been born out of a community project in North Suffolk and South Norfolk, and we're currently being incubated by the Climate Majority Project, which was previously known as the Moderate Flank. You may or may not know a little bit about that, but I'll give you a bit of background. I've been in Extinction Rebellion since the start, since 2018, very involved in the political circle, in the operations team, heading up the digital team. And while others from maybe Insulate Britain and Burning Pink and Just Stop Oil have gone off to be the radical flank, there was a whole bunch of us that said, well, maybe we should form the moderate flank, which is a home for people who might not be on the road to committing acts of civil disobedience, on the basis that I think about 80% of people don't think the government's doing enough on climate change, and 60% of people want to take action but don't know what to do. And while civil disobedience might be a logical consequence of the government's inaction on climate change, we're aiming to create a very broad church for those that want to act, those that want to do something now. And community climate action is one of the core bits of the Climate Majority Project. And as Jerry said, he and I met at a meetup in Bidston discussing what that activity kind of looks like. What does it feel like? So I wanted to tell you today a little bit of our story. So thanks for your time. And like I say, reading the bios in the chat, really impressed and slightly intimidated by the quality of the audience here. So I'm sure it'll be a fruitful discussion, and I'm hoping it will both inspire and that there can be some cross-pollination and mutual learning, because we're aiming not to reinvent the wheel or duplicate, and we all respectively stand on the shoulders of giants, and there's much really good activity going on. But we want to try and put it under a banner and call it something. We've called it Community Climate Action. So without further ado, I'm probably going to share my screen and run through some slides, and I hope it won't be death by PowerPoint, and there'll be an opportunity for some interaction and some Q&A. So bear with me just one moment.
Jules, will you be sharing your PowerPoint afterwards?
Yes, happy to share the slides and the PowerPoint and also the recording as well. So don't feel the need to take copious amounts of notes, because we have lots of documentation in support of the slides and what have you as well. So I'm just going to share my screen. And if I then do the presentation, that should hopefully work. So you should be able to see a Community Climate Action logo. So shout if you can't. Now, I'm in this room, I'm invariably preaching to the choir, preaching to the converted. So the starting point is the government isn't coming to save us. That they don't have a plan. They've got no credible. The High Court has ruled there's no credible route, or their plan isn't credible in terms of reaching net zero even by 2050. COP is a failure, as I'm sure we all know. It's in United Arab Emirates, with the head of a global oil company as the president this year. I'm not expecting great things from COP. It's a massive talking shop and a bit of a lobbying for the exchange of fossil fuel contracts. And the United Nations have declared code red for humanity. And this is the path that we're on, and we've really got to accept it's going to get terrible. It's going to get really bad. We are going to breach 1.5 degrees. We're exceeding our planetary boundaries, and there's probably nothing right now we can do to stop that. But we can still act. And so while the United Nations have declared code red for humanity, also the proceedings for the National Academy of Science have confirmed that global warming is already on the verge of crossing 1.5 degrees, even if the climate forcing pathway is substantially reduced in the near term, and we're nowhere near that. So we're going to be really difficult, troublesome territory. So part of what we're doing in terms of community climate action is really planning for those kind of scenarios as well, doing everything that we can to mitigate and adapt to mitigate the effects and adapt to our changing weather and environment. But I just want to say as well, because people speak of hope as if it's this delicate, ephemeral thing made of whispers and spiders' webs. And it's not. Hope has dirt on it, dirt on her face and blood on her knuckles and the grit of cobblestones in her hair and just spat out a tooth as she rises for another go. And that's where we are. And it's not about getting knocked down. It's about how we pick ourselves up. And this is one of my favorite quotes from Sir James Bevan, who's chair of the Environment Agency. So climate change plus growth. And I noticed that one of the questions in the chat was about degrowth. That's a really interesting topic. So climate change plus growth is an existential threat to our economy, our environment, our security, our happiness, and our way of life. And we can choose to ignore this problem, or we can choose to tackle it. And I'm betting that you're all in this room because you think the second approach is preferable to the first. So I just want to touch on Extinction Rebellion and community climate action. It's not a zero-sum game. Get out on the streets, cause mayhem and mischief and trouble for the establishment, because civil disobedience has been a core part of change for the whole of human existence, in terms of the Chartists, the Levelers, the suffragettes. And Noam Chomsky said that change is rarely a gift from above. It always comes from struggles from below. But I drew this little diagram because XR is the tip of a spear, and it's it creates space behind it. But I've having dedicated 4 years of my life to Extinction Rebellion on the theory of change that mass civil disobedience will force the government to take action on climate change. 4 years later, we're out of time and we're no closer because there is no mass. And I would love to see you at the big one. I'm going to physically be there. But I don't think 100,000 people protesting is enough to change the government or change policy. And even if we did change the government, we'd probably have a choice between bad or less bad. Now, behind Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, and they're very brave individuals that are willing to sacrifice their liberty for this cause, they create a void. They've successfully moved the Overton window to the point where lots of people are talking about climate like they never have before. But behind that, because Extinction Rebellion specifically don't talk about solutions because they don't figure a citizens' assembly, there is a void. There is a big gap. And if we don't fill that gap with a positive story of abundance or systemic change, then the Daily Mail fills that with a hair shirt future, or the Telegraph fills it with how climate change, literally the headline I saw was how climate change was a plan to topple Western democracy. That's what we're faced against. We all know the story about the oligarch-controlled media and how it's not in their interest. We have to fill that void. So the other pillars of that triangle are community action and deliberative democracy. And so that's really what we're going to be focusing on today. So I'm just going to ask, what's your plan? I can't quite see everyone in the room, but maybe, who's got a plan? Can't see any hands up. So the question, what's your plan, was the theme of Extinction Rebellion's October 2019 rebellion, I think. And we asked the government, what's your plan? We asked the ministries, what's your plan? And personally, I convened a People's Assembly in Parliament with representatives from industry. So we had Dale Vince talking to Bays. We had an ex-chief superintendent talking to the Home Office. And some farmers talking to DEFRA, and we were literally like, what's your plan? There really hasn't been a response to that, and I can't see any credible plan. So community climate action is all about writing our plan, grassroots, ground up, using deliberative democracy. So community climate action is set up to write and enact our community climate action plans to meet our respective district and county council climate emergency targets. Now, some might be better than others, and looking at Bromsgrove and Worcester, not so great, but we can perhaps improve on those. But the basic premise is we are acting in support of our parish, our town, our district, and our county, and ultimately our government policy. So, what's to object to? We all know it's urgent. It has to be done at some point, and it will take us all. So from my perspective, and Rupert Reed talks a lot about the precautionary principle, I figure we best just crack on. Let's get it done. And we can do this because it's our civic duty and we're acting in the best interests of our community. And, while we're at it, we're not just reducing our carbon, we're also increasing biodiversity. We're also improving the quality of our air and reducing the amount of particulates and pollution that we might be emitting in the meantime. So we can make England a much greener and more pleasant land. You might have seen the People's Plan for Nature, because I think Britain's in the bottom 10% of countries for biodiversity. So we've got work cut out. So what we're doing is we're growing community resilience in the face of crises by way of mutual aid, and mutual aid has become a common term following the pandemic. So I think we're all pretty used to that just in our communities in terms of how we come together to face these crises. And it is a bit of a polycrisis right now with cost of living, cost of energy, potentially recession, increasing inflation, and these kind of things. So really, it's about how we come together as communities. So we're basing it around our community farm and our pub. And I can talk at length about community benefit societies and how they should be the custodian and the vehicle for this systemic change, because they're not for private profit. So if a community benefit society owns your community energy generation, or in fact even delivers your retrofitting, the surplus doesn't go overseas, it doesn't go to shareholders, it comes back to the benefit of the community. So we've kicked off with our 3 parishes locally, which is a parish of Thelneatham, Hopton cum Nettishall, and Blow Norton. And we've gone to, and I'll talk about the methodology, but we've gone to our parish councils and said, we'd like to write a community climate action plan. Will you support that? And the National Lottery liked the idea so much that they've given us a little bit of money to go and do it. So we've got formal votes of support for the activity from each parish council. So iFarm, our community benefit society, becomes the delivery partner, but it becomes parish activity. So it's formal parish activity, which is really important. And the National Lottery funded it because it's replicable, it's scalable, and it leaves a legacy. So we've got our pub, we've got nice 10 acres of land at iFarm, and we're in some very rural parishes that actually cross the border into Norfolk. So it's not just Suffolk, although there's a lot of focus on Suffolk in the presentation. But it's 3 parishes, 2 different counties, 2 different districts. And like I say, we're basing our activity around a pub, which is a great place to have conversations over a pint. We're supported and funded by our district council, Plunkett Foundation, Power to Change, kind of the usual suspects that would probably support Community Benefit Society. But this particular activity is national lottery funded. And that's Dave, and one of the bits of fungus on our land. And so this is iFarm. We've got 10 acres and we're doing some limited market gardening, and we're doing some nature-based conservation and carbon sequestration, this kind of thing. And you wouldn't believe the amount of rubbish we've cleared, tons and tons of metal and plastic. But we've now got some rigs down, and we're growing garlic and onion and a million and one other things that Brian, our master gardener, would tell you about. 15 different varieties of tomato, that kind of thing. And we're hoping to connect that farm to plate straight to the pub, because everyone loves a story about food. So a lot of what we're doing in terms of community climate action is storytelling, and a lot of these stories, they resonate already. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. People understand there are systemic challenges, and we're in a very rural area that's blue through and through, that's Brexit voting, but the story that we're telling still resonates because people really understand, and we've still got surprisingly large pockets of deprivation when it comes to fuel poverty, 20% above the national average, food and other pressures on the economy and work and what have you, and resourcing. So we've taken on our community pub via the government's community ownership fund. We're telling a story about how we can create the pub as a net exporter of energy. We can be a power station. And then that has a wider consequence in terms of looking at a smart energy microgrid for the village. So we've got some really large engineering aspirations, and we're on the journey to, as part of that, being part of our net zero aspiration. But it kind of starts where we are. It starts where you are. You might have an asset of community value. You might have an existing organization. You might have some existing groups that want to partner. We're providing warm spaces in winter, so others don't have to, because we're a community benefit society. Our two purposes are environmental education and protection, and health and well-being. And health and well-being is from social isolation and loneliness. Where those two things meet is the climate and ecological emergency, because that's environmental protection and education, but it's also health and well-being, because without a healthy environment, you can't have the other one. And there's so much eco-anxiety around in our young people and our communities right now that that's really part of what we're talking about. I might just crack on. I put a break in there, but I think we're probably doing okay for time. We're about 25 minutes from when we start, about 20 minutes. Do you want to have a quick break and ask any questions? The next thing is methodology, skills, funding, and quite actually what we've done with the with community climate action. Are people happy to plow on? I can't see you all, so. What do you reckon, Jerry? Shall I just crack on?
I'm happy. I'm here. I'm seeing a few nods. I can't see everyone either, but I'm generally thinking people want to crack on. Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Jerry, could you ask Sue to mute herself? She's got dog issues.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought I was muted. Yeah, my dog had an operation today, and she's not ready to use her hood.
Oh. So really the rest of the presentation is about methodology, skills, funding, and organization. I noticed in the chat some of you are Extinction Rebellions. You'll be fairly familiar with self-organizing systems and holacracy, and we generally sort of take that approach. We are a limited company, so some of us are directors of the company, so we have fiduciary duty because we're handling other people's money. But rather than power, we like to talk about responsibilities. So roles come with responsibilities. But generally, as an organization, we are community owned and democratically controlled. So if people don't like how it's being run or what we're doing, we can have a vote. So first of all, methodology. So community climate action planning. So the very first thing to do is present a resolution to your local parish or town council. Now, having looked up Bromsgrove, I think you just have a district council. It appears it's a non-parished area, so there's no town or parish, and this is primarily designed to be the kind of lowest common denominator, because individuals on your town and parish council are volunteers and unpaid.
Do you have parishes, councils?
Sorry?
We have 19 parish councils.
Oh, you do? Fantastic. Okay, cool. Oh, that's
And
The town centre.
the thing is, the council is Bromsgrove and district. It has a huge district.
And there's no town council for the centre of Bromsgrove, unfortunately.
okay. Well, that's good. That means you've got 19 parish councils to kind of tip over. We've done it in a group of 3. But the first thing is to turn up to meetings, and probably myself and my colleague Thomas were the only members of the public at the parish meetings more often than not, because they're really boring. My superpower is developing a tedium shield. I've now joined one of the parish councils, so I'm a parish councillor. But the first thing is just to turn up, and there is a section for public business. And it's to simply request, can we write a community climate action plan with the blessing of the parish council in support of our district and county council policy? And we would like that to be entered into the minutes, and we would like you to vote. And that forces a decision, it forces a vote. So it's either, it's clearly a yes or a no. And it would be very uncomfortable, I think, for any parish councillor to vote against the district and county's policy. It would put them in a rather unfortunate position. So it's highly likely you'll get a yes, but the first thing is to go to the meetings. Depending on the council, the frequency might be monthly, it might be quarterly. So that's the first.
That can be done in the district council. Members of the public can act like that.
Yes, they can, absolutely. It's often easier to influence on a parish level, because it's smaller, and a collection of parishes will then influence the district, and in turn potentially the county. That's certainly our experience. But please don't be afraid to just go straight to district and what have you. And actually, because the district and county council have these policies, they're very interested in what can they do, because they have limited money, they can't pass laws, and they really need the community to act. So most councils are very interested in how do we get the community to take action. But that's the first step.
Yeah, Jules, I'm a parish councillor, and we actually have an environment policy and action plan. We put the two together. So we have taken that first step. We've publicised it quite widely in our newsletters, and we do encourage participation in our meetings. We have a local residents action group. None of the members are prepared to join us as parish councillors, but their view is that they want to hold us to account. So they turn up to every meeting, bless them, and they do bring some really good points, which we do take on board. So there is some participation already in one of the 19. I suspect that's true of others, but I don't know the other parish councils so well.
Jules, I doubt it. I think the rest of us just live in the town centre, and I don't know of any other parish involvement.
No.
Maybe Licky.
Okay, well, that's really good to hear, Janet. And I'm sure there is lots of good activity across the board. We're finding that, again, there are groups working alongside or parishes doing very, very similar things to what we're doing. So really, we're just crystallizing that under a banner and helping to publish some best practice to share methodology. So the second thing is to hold a series of workshops. And Janet, it sounds like if you've already published a plan, this might be something you've either done or doing. So I'll hold a series of workshops developing the plan. And at that stage, you don't need everyone to join in. We probably garnered about 5% of our population after flyering everyone and advertising. And 5% is pretty good in terms of writing a plan. And then when we actually start to deliver the activity, more people will start to get involved. So we don't need everyone to join in, but it is a participatory and open process. So we have literally flyered every house, made it available via parish magazines, notice boards, and what have you. Advertised on Facebook and on Nextdoor and on all of the relevant social media. And And then the third thing is actually writing the plan. So, and because it will become a formal plan lodged in the council minutes, and it's permission to actually go and do that activity. So there's some of us that will take action. There's some that will be passive and will be okay, and there are some that will object. It's not necessarily completely plain sailing. In the parish of Felneatham, there were quite a few objections, and it only narrowly passed 3-2. You know, so we can expect some objections. And number 4 would be present the plan via a people's assembly. And again, this needs to be public and it needs to be well publicized, because that's a very important part of the deliberative democracy. And it starts to set a precedent for local residents in the community getting used to decisions and plans being created by themselves, having a sense of ownership, a pride in place in their civic duty, and gets them used to being politics being a participatory sport, not a spectator sport. And it's also an opportunity for objection and clarification or addition. The plan is designed to be a living document, and the plan will then sit alongside neighbourhood plan and emergency plan. So once ratified by the People's Assembly, we're presenting it to our council for adoption, and it will be formally adopted, and the plan will sit alongside, as I say, other things like neighbourhood plan and emergency plan. And what we're doing also includes biodiversity planning as well. So our plan, we're lucky enough to be in Suffolk. Suffolk County Council have an aspiration to be the greenest county in England, and also have a net zero target of 2030, which is kind of world beating. So we count ourselves very lucky to be in the county of Suffolk, because we have lots of support. But that also means that what the county council is doing can perhaps be an exemplar, and also a roadmap for others as well. So like I say, it then forms a suite of documents within the parish or town, which is an emergency plan, which should be updated to include the climate emergency and things like flooding or fires or drought, lack of water, you know, what happens if we run out of water, or, you know, food. Things like the lack of tomatoes or salad is just indicative of what we've got to come, both in terms of rationing and lack of food in terms of our imports. So you'd have an emergency plan, neighbourhood development plan, biodiversity plan, and a community climate action plan. So what we did with the way that we've done this is through a series of 3 workshops. And our first workshop is stakeholder mapping, really important. So there's a few people in our pub, and we did the classic post-it note exercise. Who's our stakeholders? And then we put the sign up, community climate action, stakeholder map, and we left it in the pub over the weekend, and people added to it. And what we ended up with is a pretty concise diagram of who our stakeholders are, both within the area and outside of the geographical area, but who might need to be kept informed. This includes businesses, land and biodiversity, shelter, warmth, water, our political organisations in terms of parish, district and county, education, transport, faith. You sort of get the picture. So we're creating this map of our stakeholders. And actually what we've discovered is many of those organisations, in terms of our anchor institutions or other organisations working in the field of biodiversity or conservation and farm management and what have you, they're also as concerned as we are, and we're much stronger together. And that's one of the key things, is acting in concert as a community means we're stronger together. Acting in concert as a combined set of parishes means we can leverage much more of our resources and potentially capital. So this is just a snapshot of some of the organisations that we're now deeply sort of engaged with, in terms of, for instance, West Suffolk College are looking at their green skills program. What kind of courses can they put on to actually facilitate a transition in terms of retrofitting or community energy? Suffolk Farming Wildlife Advisory Group are looking at programs to handhold our farming community in terms of transition, because lots of farmers know there's a problem, but it's a very lonely and risky journey to transition. So these are also members of our community, because you know what? People who live and work in our villages also, or live in our villages, also work at these kind of institutions, you know. And Professor Tim O'Riordan, who's Emeritus Professor of Environmental Science at the University of East Anglia, is also chair of the Norfolk Association of Local Councils. And, you know, he said there's real scope for Norfolk Association of Local Councils to explore the lessons being learned by community climate action, in forms of the management, financing, recruitment, and widespread improvement of local livelihoods. You know, so we're getting some quite significant traction here. And he firmly believes it should be connected to county-based devolution at an early stage. So Norfolk's got a devolution deal on the table with central government. Our second workshop was all about community wellbeing and values, and this is about taking the isms out of it. You know, so it's not socialism, it's not conservatism. You know, it's what do we value together? You know, we all want clean rivers. We can all agree that 98% pollution and 100%, you know, 100% biodiversity or sort of ecology failure is not good for our water. We all agree we want clean air. So we really looked at community wellbeing and values, and we decided on what themes to take forward. And as I say, part of that process really was, again, focusing on our core values, so we could all really agree. And it's all about reaching agreement, and because there's more that connects than divides. I'm a Labour Party member. When I'm in this East Anglia, I vote Green, and I'm working and living with Conservatives. You know, but really, when it comes to this, none of that matters, because we all agree. And you can perhaps see some of the dots around there. We all agree that wild space is very important, that community is really important, that connection, sharing and belonging is very important, that kindness is important. So that's what we focus on. And we drew that up into a map of what resilience, community resilience and well-being looks like. And I'm just going to reiterate again, with the United Nations declaring Code Red for humanity, the extreme weather that we are going to collectively face over the coming decade we're going to have to pull together to face this. So that what does community resilience and well-being feels like is really important. And out of that, we also came up with 5 themes that we were going to work on. So we decided we were going to work on transport, energy, food, nature and environment, and housing. We came up with 5 themes for our plan. And workshop 3 was all about action. So what projects are we going to take forward, and what do we want to do first? And that was really well attended, and lots of people were volunteering. Everyone was very engaged. And what we did was we used a GROW methodology, which is goal, the reality of where we are now, our options in terms of what we could do, and who's going to do it. So we used this GROW methodology, and what we came up with is a variety of projects, and those projects form the basis of our plan. So as you can see through the series of workshops, one was held in the pub in Thelneatham, one was in the village hall in Hopton, the other was in the village hall in Blow Norton. Throughout this process, it's a participatory process that anyone can join. We had parish councillors there, district councillors interested in the outcome. Our MPs are Liz Truss and Matt Hancock. And, you know, Liz Truss is interested in the outcomes of what we're doing. So it's been a very public and visible process. And so this particular one is mapping local sites for our biodiversity audit and plan. The next one, and these are just some examples, retrofitting. So we're going to identify properties that need retrofitting. We've done some desk-based research. We know there's 550 homes, 840 need retrofitting. They're band D or below. Our college is willing to put on courses, and we can form a retrofitting company and go and do it. We're not going to wait for the government. We're just going to go and do it. This is post-COVID economic regeneration. Yeah, this is creating jobs in the local community and green skills and just transition. Which again, if we can use that kind of language that we all agree on, it's very difficult for politicians or people in net zero watch or climate deniers to actually vote against this kind of activity.
Jules, will you be looking for central government funding for this?
I think it highly unlikely we'll get any central government funding. So what I'll come on to do is talk about how we do fund the activity. We are aiming to get funding. We might get more funding from the National Lottery because the outcome of this particular bit of funding has been really good. They may choose to fund it. The central government, who knows? I don't have a lot of faith in a government that goes to COP and say they want to be a world leader in renewables and immediately comes back and issues new oil and gas licenses. So yeah. I'm operating on the principles that we will need to fund this activity and do it ourselves.
There is currently some. I'm sure you know there is currently some government funding. It's a little bit restricted, and it's for the least well-off households largely. My park was in my parish, my park home site. Most of the people there managed to get some retrofitting done, and they had a really good deal from the government, but others didn't.
Yeah, sorry, that's fantastic. I probably misunderstood your question. I thought you meant funding for this activity rather than the retrofitting. But yes, you're right. There is money available for retrofitting. And, you know, I've talked to E.ON, and E.ON have a fund of about 240 odd million that they need to spend into communities right now. And each of the utility companies have similar funds. And so there are government grants. And so, yes, let's go and retrofit our homes, you know, let's not wait. So I've just taken a slide from Bromsgrove District Council, who declared a climate emergency in 2019. What Bromsgrove say, this is the district council, what they say in their plan, on declaration of a climate emergency, and it's important they use the term emergency, local authorities affirming that it will place the climate emergency at the center of its decision-making process. And local authorities are then expected to develop carbon reduction targets and action plans to assist in the reduction of carbon emissions from their own council functions and using their sphere of influence. Now, this is a really important statement, although I think the actual plan itself lacks any ambition or aspiration, because it is simply for the council's operation and their sphere of influence. But I wonder if they really understand what their sphere of influence actually extends to. Suffolk now have a procurement policy called the Suffolk Climate Change Procurement Ask, because I wonder, it would be really interesting to see how much Bromsgrove Council spend into the local community. You may or may not have heard of community wealth building as championed by Preston, the Preston model. And that's a way of changing local authority public procurement to smaller local companies to improve the amount of money that stays in the local community. And they've been very successful doing that. And I was on the campaign team for the mayor of Newcastle, and we wrote community wealth building into his policy manifesto. I'm very pleased to say he got elected, and he's now the mayor of Newcastle in the North of Tyne. But to give you an indication, at the time, I think North of Tyne's GDP was about 17.6 billion, and about 3.5 billion of it was public sector procurement. So it's things like that. Those are the kind of levers where, if a statement is, you know, they're expected to develop carbon reduction targets and action plans using their sphere of influence, that means the whole procurement chain. And if they're not doing it, it should be. So that's just one example. But it's a really important statement. So when we do go to parish councils, we can hold this up and say, you know, it's affirming that it will place the climate emergency at the centre of its decision making. So now I'm just going to show a little bit about some of the software that we use, and I'm happy to give any tutorials. We use, this is a picture of a piece of software called Trello, which is project management software, and it's organized into columns, and each column has a card, and you can move the cards backwards and forwards between the columns. You can put all sorts of handy information and dates in. And we use an agile methodology, which is more often used for software development, but it's pretty straightforward in that you have a weekly meetup of your teams or working groups on a Monday, and you might be some blockers, or you might need some questions answered to be able to crack on with your week's work. But it's very simple. We have a resources column, so everyone knows where everything is. And then we have to do, monitoring, in progress, and done. So we can see a nice movement of cards from sort of left to right. So we're very organized in terms of our project management. This is a piece of software called Land Explorer, which is a cooperatively owned piece of software that I helped develop. So I would recommend you use this to start to map the resources and land you might have in your area, or start to ask the council for data on what public land they might have available, what bits of land might be available for rewilding, where you can grow food. It's kind of helpful for mapping Church of England land or other suitable sites.
We are awaiting a report on this very subject. I don't know how much detail will actually come out, but it's late by 6 months now.
Sure. So, some councils have to publish some data by law annually. And I'm sure if they're reticent, then I'm sure a little campaign of freedom of information requests would help. The maps and stuff you saw for our community, for our sort of map of our community engagement, that's done on a piece of software called Miro, which is just an online whiteboard. And then we're using a piece of software called One Planet, which we're just testing at the moment, which then helps us map what we're going to do in terms of our action plan. And it also shows where there might be overlaps or duplicates with other groups locally. And it puts it into a nice format that you can actually look at it through lenses like sustainability development goals and this kind of thing. So again, when you're talking to a local authority, it's really important to have those kind of those different lenses. And what it does is it based on the SDGs, you can then fill out from our GROW methodology and projects, put them into land and nature, health and happiness and what have you. And then we publish that as a document. And that's our living document that forms our climate emergency plan, and is entered into the formal record for our parish as a community generated plan with timescales. And at that point, that's when we can go and enact that. We've gained permission as a community to go and do things. It's a participatory process of deliberative democracy. And even if the government turned around tomorrow and said, great, now we need to do this, we would have to engage in this activity anyway, because we need to take everyone with us. So let's start, let's start on the journey. So it's created by the community. It's formally adopted by the parish or town council, and it's supported by the district and county council's emergency declaration. And it's delivered by community benefit societies. And in terms of funding, so when I say delivered by community benefit societies, well, community benefit societies are for profit. They have to make a profit, and profit's like red blood cells. If we don't have it, we die, but it's not our purpose. So a community benefit society has to make a profit, but that profit goes back to the benefit of the community. So that means we can engage in productive commercial activity like retrofitting, like community energy generation, like running a pub, like cultivating food, or other economic activity. And in terms of the capital costs, and I can go into really quite some considerable detail because this is underpinned by very credible economic theory by people like Centre for Local Economic Studies, who are proponents of community wealth building, and various other world-renowned economists in terms of municipal bonds. And we're exploring these avenues with Suffolk County Council. And there was also precedent with local parish councils that have used similar methods and methodologies.
Dora.
The capital can be available, and I can go into a lot of detail, but I won't bore you too much. But just to say, municipal bonds, public works loan board borrowing, a parish council can borrow up to £500,000 worth in development capital. So we can start a project, we can refinance it, and then we can recycle that money and go and use it for more development capital. And if we band together as a group of councils, then so much the better. District and county councils have almost unlimited borrowing. And that's the same as gilt bonds issued by the government. Molly Scott Cato, who's a renowned Green MEP, or wasn't a Green MEP, and economist, said municipal bonds are the way to go. We did it in the Second World War. We should be looking at that. Pensions, self-invested personal pensions, SIPs, self-administered schemes. We can take our pension money out. We can choose to invest it in community shares. And there's plenty of patient capital out there looking for a home. I think Mark Carney estimated 130 trillion at COP26 looking for a home. There's a lot of money out there looking for a safe harbor, and they would be happy with 4%, low risk, low return over 70 odd years. I've had some very constructive conversations with some pension funds on that basis. So patient capital, because with energy and with energy saving and retrofitting, there's clear payback over time. There's also really significant conversations happening in relation to biodiversity increase and carbon credits and the monetary value applied to that. So really what we're talking about here is blended finance, which is a mixture of it de-risks it for the public sector. So public sector invest, private sector invest, it de-risks it for both parties. So it's called blended finance. And then you can mix that with community shares, which is money raised by the community, which is withdrawable share capital for community benefit societies. A really good example of that is People Powered Retrofit, who are a retrofitting company as a community benefit society, and they raised £500,000 via FX, which is an ethical investment platform. So there's a variety of ways that we can tap into large-scale patient capital to then go and deliver our community climate action plans. I mean, it's no good us writing a brilliant plan, and we would like community energy and a community wind turbine or solar or ground source heat pumps if we then don't have the capital. So this is a really important part of what we're doing at Community Climate Action, is not just writing the plan, but enacting our plan, going and doing and actually delivering. It will take those in Bromsgrove are entrepreneurial. A few people in the chat said they're accountants. Fantastic, because we need people who know how to manage a balance sheet, a profit and loss, and a cash flow. But these are the businesses that we will need to create, and so they're socially minded businesses with a purpose. Wouldn't it be great if our water companies operated with a purpose, and their purpose was clean water, and what have you? So that's some of the avenues that funding can come from. And I'm in a collaborative action working group with Suffolk County Council looking at innovative forms of funding with our local enterprise partnership. Because again, what we're looking at here is creating jobs, and we're creating economic activity, and we're creating tax revenue for our local authorities. We're also creating a surplus, rather than going offshore and creating record profits for our utility companies, for organizations, probably institutional investors that pay very little tax. We are retaining that revenue. It's the velocity, is a technical term, I think, is marginal propensity to consume, the velocity of money, how much stays in the local community. So we're going to keep that surplus in our community and put it towards our social purpose.
So basically writing an annual budget. Are you determining a financial need and then raising the money to meet that, Jules, or not?
It will require a business plan. Yes. So, for instance, if the outcome of the participatory process is the community agrees that it wants community energy, then there's a process of a feasibility study and planning, deciding quite what that is, what it looks like, and then it's going to have a capital cost attached to it, and that's likely going to be in the millions, and it will have payback over time, and you'll have things like power purchase agreements involved and what have you. But it's a business plan, and it requires capital. So yes, we'll be producing a budget, and what we're hoping, or what we're proposing, is if groups are interested in writing a plan, and there is the political will, and then we will help facilitate those kind of bits of consultancy. And there are organizations that already do that. So we can also connect to lots of other organizations.
Okay, thank you.
This can also be supported by, and this is slightly longer term, by local cooperative banks. So again, I know Jamie, Mayor of Newcastle, is creating a bank, a local bank, and I understand that there's been with another organisation some very fruitful conversations with Norfolk, and Norfolk are also interested in a local cooperative bank. And in Scotland, they have the Scottish National Investment Bank that's specifically set up to combat climate change. And what that means is we can actually utilise the banking system to fund much of the kind of change that we need to see. Again, we don't need to wait for central government. We can literally do this on a very, very local basis. Also, mutual credit and societies have a part to play in that potentially as we move forward. There is a Swiss VIA, which is a mutual credit that now trades in the hundreds and hundreds of billions, set up after the Great Depression, that uses mutual credit and is backed by the Swiss franc. So it's the thing in Switzerland, mutual credit services. It frees up a whole bunch of cash. So we've done this thing in Suffolk, and it's really tiny. In North Suffolk and South Norfolk, it's pretty tiny. We've got a really cool team. We're really excited about it. And we've now got a wait list of hundreds of parishes in Norfolk and Suffolk. We're hoping to scale through Norfolk Association of Local Councils and Suffolk Association of Local Councils, and possibly Essex. But that means maybe 1,800 different parishes. So we're slightly nervous, bit of trepidation, but we are applying for funding to go and do that, and either do train the trainer sessions. And so we invite you to join us and to write and deliver your community plan. And yeah, so thank you. That's community climate action in a nutshell. And it's just the start of activity. I say that this is workshops. Writing our plan, it's just the start of activity, and we've got a decade now to deliver on what we put in that plan in terms of reaching net zero and increasing biodiversity on the way. Just today, I met with our two neighbouring parishes, Inverclay and Redgrave. They've suggested that we also include Hackney and Ixworth. So we're starting a little council of parishes, which will meet monthly, and we all agree we're not going to wait for the government. We're just going to go do. So thank you very much for listening. I'll happily answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Jules. Can I start with a question of my own? I saw there was a couple in the chat. You said that the first thing we need to do is to offer to write a plan. So that's kind of step one. And then assuming they say yes, then you go and do it. But my question is who is the we? It's almost step zero. Do we have to have a formally constituted entity to do that? Because we're a bunch of people who've got, common aims here on this call, but we're not, we're not a community benefit society or anything else. What do we need to be to ask that question in the first place?
That's a really good question. You don't need to be anything other than a member of the public. I would recommend that there's at least a bunch of you, because otherwise it's going to be a very lonely journey. But the rest of it you can build as you go. I mean, you can start off with an individual, a group, a bunch of friends. You can be and then on the way to incorporation, you can be an unincorporated association of individuals. You can start a bank account, there may well already be an organisation or organisations in the local area that would be willing to help be the delivery partner. But the first thing is just to get it in the minutes and get that sort of resolution passed. Can I go and write a plan? Can we go and write a plan? So yes, you don't need to be a legal entity or fully incorporated to ask. Rosalind.
Could I ask, are you working full time on this? And is anybody else at IFAR or anywhere?
Yeah, sure. So I do spend an awful lot of time on it. It does take an awful lot of capacity, and previously I was kind of 24/7 Extinction Rebellion. I'm receiving a little bit of money from the Climate Majority Project to help incubate this, to help it scale. But that hasn't paid, so it's been all volunteer activity really to date for this activity, the workshops and what have you. Apart from the little bit of funding we got from the National Lottery. So again, it's really important to consider capacity, but it's also really important to consider how we do pay ourselves moving forward. Again, I'll refer to Jamie, the mayor in Newcastle. I was volunteering a lot, and he cautioned me about how much I was volunteering and said, Jules, you deserve bread on your table as much as the next man, because otherwise you end up poor and hungry and can't pay your rent. So that's why it's important to consider the economic activity that sits alongside it. And between us, hopefully we can set up economic enterprises that generate revenue that can help pay for some of our social aspirations. But in short term, I guess it's like setting up a company. It's not sweat equity. There's no equity involved, but yeah, ideally you want a bunch of people that want to make something happen.
Thank you.
Judith?
Hello. When we first started up our group of Bromsgrove Climate Action, we actually got from Friends of the Earth a plan which they had drawn up, a community action plan, which to present to the council. One of our group adapted it so it was more specific to Bromsgrove, and it was probably the wrong way to go about it, but we contacted every single local councillor by email. We only got explaining what we were all about and all the rest of it, and asking if we could meet, and we only got about 4 or 5 responses out of the entire council. And we did go and meet them, and they were very encouraging and all the rest of it. But would it have been better to arrange to go to one of the council meetings, a full meeting, and bring up that then?
I would suggest, yes, it's always better to do it at a meeting in public, and also ask for a vote, because it kind of puts people on the spot. They have to choose. We supplied details of what we're asking to vote pre-meeting. That's really important, because otherwise they will say, we can't possibly vote on what you've said today. We need to think about it. It's interesting that Friends of the Earth provided a plan. It's probably a very good plan. They're very well funded. They're very well organised. But I think the difference here is asking support for the community to be able to go and do, and probably the Friends of the Earth plan was asking the council to do something. That's harder. Councils are tired like that, and they move like icebergs. They move really slowly. So this is allowing the community to go and do it, and I think most councillors are kind of like, oh, phew.
But we're only allowed 3 minutes if we're members of the public presenting something, and I think it would come as a shock if we asked for a vote. I'm not saying it's not possible, but 3 minutes isn't very long to address the subject. You get 15 minutes, so it could be 5 different aspects of 3 minutes each, but usually they make people share the time.
It's a very good point, Sue. Yeah. I've frequently only had 5 minutes at the end of a meeting. very important to put it in writing beforehand, like I say, with some documents. And then when you have your 3 minutes, you can just state, you know, the United Nations have declared code red for humanity. I'm very pleased to see that, you know, our respective councils have declared an emergency. We'd really like to support you in your aspirations. Can we write a plan? So hopefully succinct enough. But yes, you frequently only get a small amount of time. Janet and Chris.
Thank you. I assume that your district and county councils employ maybe a full-time or 2 part-time climate change officers, as Bromsgrove does. Do you find them helpful? Do you work closely with the staff?
I think we're really lucky in Suffolk because yes, the cabinet has employed 7 people to work on their climate emergency plan delivery, and it's called SCEP is the acronym. It's Suffolk Climate Emergency Plan. So there's 7 people, and I work very closely with them now. And in fact, we have collaborative action working groups that include members from other anchor institutions within the community. So that includes the universities, the colleges, the district councils, the local enterprise partnership, and I'm one of the community representatives on the collaborative action working group. So I'm finding it to be really fruitful at the moment, and I'm actually really surprised and pleasantly surprised at the veracity and the quality of the work that I'm seeing. Although it's a steep hill to climb, and we still have to hold them to account. And actually, I think what Suffolk are doing might be an exemplar and a model for others to follow. So I have been trying to encourage them to publish more. So we are looking at avenues to publishing through the local government association to actually provide a roadmap for other local authorities. Because often it's not a will, it's more not knowing how, you know, or not having the imagination. So yeah, generally it's a pretty healthy working environment, I think. Thank you.
That's really good. Yeah, the nearest we have to that, I guess, is that we do have the climate change working group. We have produced that action plan, which you were not very impressed by, and some of us are not too, because it doesn't go into quite enough detail of the future actions and how they're going to get there. And I think that is because we do have a lack of a really good ginger group, if I may call it that, like yours. The parish councils, well, I happen to be a parish council and district at the moment, but the parish councils don't seem to talk to the climate change officers very much. One came to address us at a parish assembly, but that was the only time that we really had very much to do with them. There is just this lack of kind of working together. So how many people in your group actually get to have regular meetings with the climate change officers? Is it just yourself, or, you know, would they be meeting with as a group?
Sure. So our collaborative action working group meets monthly. Within that, we then have, and this is a county council initiative, and within the collaborative action group, there are district councillors and, like I say, representation from anchor institutions. We then have sub-working groups, which include finance, communications, community, which are 3 that I'm in. I think our community engagement officer is very, very active, meeting with parish councillors and other community groups. Yeah. And regularly meets with us, and actually some of the some of the activity they've got planned, I think, is quite remarkable. They're setting up a youth parliament and going to have an effectively youth citizens assembly in Suffolk, which is fantastic.
Yeah, fabulous, well done. And I think that we've got to go that way too. Absolutely, yes, and open up to the public. There seems to be a kind of suspicion of the public in some ways with some councils, certainly including ours. And most of the decision making is done at cabinet level, which is not a mixed political cabinet. It's a majority party only, and the portfolio holders seem to. Well, we are lucky in that we did have a portfolio holder for climate that actually has been meeting with BCA regularly, but some of the portfolio holders don't have a great deal to do with the with the public, you know. So that's, yeah, thank you. That's really useful.
But the work group only meets now 3 times a year, which is useless.
So I think it was Chris and Rosalind.
Well, a lot of it's already been said actually from the councillors, but I mean, my feeling is that if you went to the district council and said, "Can we produce a plan?" they'll say, "We've already got one." But of course, they're keeping it very much themselves, and then not involving people at all, and it's not a community thing.
Yeah.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Chris. It's not a community plan, and what we're asking for is, can we write a community climate action plan? Yeah, how do we participate in this process? They've written a plan that covers the council operations and what's in their sphere of influence, but what's, you know, the vast majority of carbon emissions are not within their sphere of influence, whereas
exactly, I've been telling them that all the way along.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, so can we write a community plan? Can we help you? It's really important, you know, it's really important that we phrase this as, you know, we're positioning it as a bit of being helpful to deliver their policy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No problem. Rosalind and then Jerry.
Just to take up Ian's question on the chat, have you helped any towns at all, and what was the reaction in Liverpool to your ideas, Liverpool being a town?
I'm not quite sure where Liverpool comes from.
I thought that this event where Jerry met you was in Liverpool.
Oh yes, so but that was yes, but that was a kind of a meeting of like-minded climate activists at Bidston Observatory rather than any kind of public event for Liverpool. But yes, you're quite right. Have I done it in any towns? No, this is pretty much brand new in terms of our activity. I've got an upcoming meeting with an organisation called Our Futures. They're based in Grimsby Football Club. And in terms of general kind of community organising activity, I have spent the last 5 years pre-pandemic up to the end of the pandemic organising in Newcastle. I was part of the campaign team for the Metro Mayor, help develop policy and manifesto policy, and the core tenets of his policy manifesto was declare a climate emergency, hold a citizens' assembly, and as part of that, we had a Green Industrial Revolution event at the Discovery Museum in Newcastle, and have had some very high-level I personally have had some very high-level discussions, you know, with the deputy leader of Gateshead Council, who are not part of that combined authority, but again have, you know, sort of some you know, really good aspirations. Certainly in terms of the Northeast and the Mayor of Newcastle, you know, Jamie is committed to being the home of the green industrial revolution.
And can I ask, with regard to Newcastle, the Saudi Arabians are now putting money in and putting it in not just the football club, but the whole community. As that kind of linked over to what's being done by the mayor and initiatives of yourself?
Money from oil, so.
Well, I have no idea what.
Scandalous.
I mean, I've heard.
Son's an ardent supporter of Newcastle United, yes. But I mean, he is amazed at what they're achieving in the community, and he can't understand the kind of their logic, but it's happening.
That's probably a bit outside of my area of expertise, in that I know the Saudis have bought football clubs, just like Russian oligarchs have bought football clubs, and I'm not aware of any relationship between the mayor's office and any Saudi.
Things like food banks.
It's news to me. I know I haven't been in Newcastle for a couple of years, so post pandemic. But it wouldn't surprise me, because you know they've got a lot of money and they like to bury some of their some of their human rights abuses and terrible stuff they're doing with fossil fuels with token gestures in the community. I mean, I personally, I don't think that's a fabulous thing, but that's my own personal opinion. Sorry, I've lost track a little bit of who's next, but Jerry maybe, or anyone else?
Yeah, if I can go. As you were telling your story, and it's occurred to me before as well, you talk about these workshops, your people's assembly, and I'm wondering how important actually practically in everything you've done has it been to have your own pub, you know, where you can just meet. Would we struggle if we don't have a place where we can do things?
No, I think it's been helpful because it's handy to have a conversation over a pint, but you could do that in anybody's pub, really. We've only held one of our events actually in the pub, and the pub probably wasn't best suited for it. And actually, we hired village halls to do the other ones, and they were better venues. So it's a really interesting question. But the community climate action planning is one of a number of things happening sort of around the pub. So I don't think it's essential. But I would advise you all to go and buy a pub.
There is a community pub, as you know, in Finstall, if we wanted a community pub, and I'm sure they would welcome us there.
Brilliant. There we go. You can get involved in that.
Awesome.
Invest a little bit in community shares. Ask them about their green plan and if they would host some conversations about community climate, you know, about community climate action planning. They should be very aligned because it's expensive running a pub because of energy. So that makes it really difficult. And also they're very aligned in terms of community ownership and actually doing something in the community. So it'd probably be a fruitful place for conversation.
Jerry, the XR members who are going on to another meeting, their meeting starts at 8:15, so we've still got quite a bit of time. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, so my next question is more to everyone. I see that Edwina has just asked it in the chat already for me. Maybe we need to get our heads together and have a chat about this next week. Shall we do, you know, because this time does seem to work for people, shall we have a meeting, you know, same time next week to, you know, decide, you know, what we ought to do next and how we get it started and, you know, how we pitch it to the council and when, because we've got a lot of people on the call who know the ins and outs of the council and, you know, how to get things on the agenda. I feel I need to do a bit of reading up of what we've already got. Is that the next thing we should do, is have a chat amongst ourselves about what we do next?
Next Thursday, Chris and I are going to the big one.
Of course, yeah. So maybe 2 weeks' time.
And we would need 2 weeks to digest all these slides and things that Jules would send to us, I would have thought. Could I ask whether Marion has any reactions, please?
I just guess I'm really interested, obviously running a charity that has an environmental aspect to it. I'm interested in the idea of making businesses because that's what we do. We make quite a lot of our own money. We don't make all of it, and there are very good reasons for that because we like to get grants as well. And if we make all our own money, we won't get any grants. So you have to have it. I think I was really intrigued by the whole idea of the retrofitting business. And I mean, I was down in North Suffolk not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago. Wish I'd realised that that's where you were. I might have had a little wander around. But I think understanding more about actually how you're doing things is really interesting. I mean, in the back of my head, and I can't actually sort of commit to this because obviously I have to talk to trustees and our directors. We are at the moment sort of in a process of reviewing our arts and MEMS because our environmental bit is quite restrictive and so are some of the other bits. But we could widen it and therefore we could act as an overarching organisation to hold everything together certainly in the first few bits. We are also the hosts for the asset-based community development community builders that are in Bromsgrove. And that sort of seems to fit because that's all about community action, getting people in the community to get up and do things themselves for themselves, rather than waiting for other people. And that's, I mean, just, I guess, just so people are aware, our community builders have been in post now almost 18 months. And it's quite a struggle to get people to do things, to come together, to meet together, and then to get off the ground and actually take stuff forward. We've had some really good successes, but they're quite sort of few and far between, because people are used to having things done to them.
Sorry,
and to change that mindset is difficult.
Sorry, Marion, could you repeat what took 18 months?
So getting people to understand that they have the ability to answer their own challenges. So if they want to do something, they can do it. They don't need permission from the council to do lots of things. They can just get on and do it. But actually, because people for decades have had everything done to them, if you go off and do something of your own accord, then you're seen as a little bit of a maverick. One of my community builders, for instance, has gone around Rubery planting plants. And when she tried to get people to do it legitimately, shall we say, with community gardens, wasn't so much interest. When she made it a little bit sort of illegal and sort of spoke about planting bulbs in St Chad's Park under cover of darkness, suddenly everyone wanted to be involved. So, which is really interesting. I find that a really interesting concept, that suddenly people are all being going around planting things in all sorts of places because they think they shouldn't be. But yeah, I think there is an element, and we mustn't underestimate that, because it is, and I can see why working within the parish, actually, because parishes are usually quite small, so it's it's a bit easier. Really good example of a parish pulling things together is Clent. So in the past, I think in the past year, 18 months, they've built a parish hall, a village hall. Yeah, they've got the money together and they built it, which I think is amazing. And that's been done very quickly, but that's because there was people with a common purpose. And I think the other thing is, so one of the things I sort of said in my intro in the chat was that I'm very interested in, if people are hungry, if people can't afford their energy bills, if they can't pay the rent because the rent's gone up, how do we engage them in something that might seem sort of quite far away to them, because actually they can't put food on the plate on their table, and that's all they're worried about. They're not really worried about 1.5 degree temperature change, especially if it means there's nice hot summers. You know, it's that sort of thing. So there's also that element, I think, is that there'll be some education stuff as well. So I don't underestimate the challenge. I think it's a really interesting piece of work, and I'm really I'll be following your progress, Jules, because it's like, I'm like, oh right, okay, that seems to be really good. We're a furniture reuse project and a computer reuse project, and we're really interested in the circular economy. So I thought it might be also interesting if we have a conversation outside of this about the circular economy and how we get people really engaging with the circular economy, because everybody can do that almost.
Absolutely. I mean, so I'm actually talking on the 21st, before I come down to London for the big one. On the 21st, I'm talking about the circular economy at Suffolk University Sustainability Institute. I think you mentioned some really interesting things there about common purpose. You know, when you have a common purpose, things can move really quickly. And how do we reach these non-traditional audiences where there was a piece of graffiti in 1938 Germany, which was first food, then rent, talking about food strikes. And when it comes down to it, the price of broccoli is tripled, or tripled. And so is hitting the poorest hardest now. I mean, price of butter has gone up 20%, so these are the conversations that we need to be having about how we build resilience to protect the most vulnerable in our communities. And I'm delighted to hear you've got You know, so you potentially be a custodian for the asset-backed community development, because that's really what we're also what we're talking about here is an asset-backed lands, property, energy, retrofit. They're all asset-backed. You know, so yeah, I'm sure we'll have some fruitful conversations.
And there's a huge waiting list here in Bromsgrove for allotments. So, you know, just something simple like demanding more allotments. And each parish council, if more than 6 people come together and ask for allotments, they are duty bound to provide them. So, you know, we could do it. And it would be really good to work with some parishes, some parish councillors too.
An allotment is a really important thing. It's a small place to grow flowers or vegetables on, or it's the award or gift of something. So it is your allotment. And yes, it's hard fought and hard won. The right to an allotment from a 28-year political campaign. Chris has got your hand.
Having spent all day on the allotment, it's interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I'm surprised actually. Very interesting comments from Marion, but she didn't mention that she's got a food bank there as well, which is very significant, I think. Anyway, I wondered, Jules, if you come across the power station thing that's happening, with the 2 artists in South London.
I know Dan really well, yeah.
Oh, do you? Oh, right, okay. Yeah, I've been sort of supporting them as well, and I think it's an incredible thing. And it's very interesting what Marion was saying about doing it yourself. This is the main, I think that the main message here, that we don't hang about, that we can actually make this happen, and we can make funding. I mean, they printed their own money and did all sorts of weird things, but basically it's crowdfunding. It's crowdfunding that they did, really. But they're an extraordinary example, if you haven't come across them, of 2 artists who decided that they could make the whole of the street that's sort of like a power station, and their local school into a power station, and actually fund retrofit. But one of the things that I think they've really got going for them, which perhaps Bromsgrove hasn't, is this idea of community. We're not very good at community, I don't think, in Bromsgrove. Having tried to get our climate conversation started last year, I went round and knocked on doors, and 1 or 2 other people helped here. But it was a bit of an uphill battle. And I think really this thing about having your own farm and your own pub and whatever is a sort of a hub thing for the community.
It is a great catalyst, yeah. Walthamstow, where the bank job is, and also where the power station is, I think they're the most indebted place in the UK. You know, so they're quite poor communities. So I think that, you know, again, bringing the communities together is really interesting challenge. Sue.
What I wanted to say is that there is perhaps an opportunity if a group got together, and this may be a subgroup of the group, the drilling that they're doing to find get electricity from under the ground, which is meant to be a community project, but we were shocked in council. They cabinet announced it was going to be put to commercial company to run. We did object at the time, and we could, if a group got together, they could put a rival bid in, because they haven't, as far as I know, called for actual companies to take part, but their intention is to use an ordinary electricity commercial company to manage it, which it seems to me there's an opportunity there where if the community decided to maneuver and take it over.
So you said to get electricity from under the ground, don't you
Well,
mean?
I'm sorry,
The district heating network.
but the pump thing that they're
Ground
planning to do.
source heat pump.
Thank you. Thanks. My words leave me. I'm saying I'm getting senile.
No worries.
That's just over the fence from where we live
Yes.
Sure.
into an aquifer.
But
That was what I was talking about.
But actually, that's quite right. Bromsgrove is extraordinary in the sense that it's got this huge aquifer underneath it, and it doesn't actually make sense, in my view, to go for air source heat pumps on every house. It makes much more sense to do a community ground source heat pump.
No, but they've already decided that all this electricity would go to the
yes, but they have. But
Yeah.
she's quite right. I mean, we should be thinking about putting in a community project and on these lines.
Yes.
Yes,
very-
yeah.
Maybe a local electricity bid, a smaller one, using the local electricity bill legislation rather than taking over a huge water project.
Just as a little thought, I'm a member of the partnership board, the Bromsgrove Partnership Board, and there is a subcommittee of that, which is the cost of living crisis book group. Now we're starting to look at what's going to happen next winter because that is looming. So I'm sort of thinking there are different places that we can hang this on. There are hooks to hang this on. So if you're thinking about that energy, Act on Energy, a part of the cost of living crisis and the partnership board, and are always looking for different ways of doing things. And I'm just wondering whether, rather than just sort of going in, are there sort of ways we can go through sort of a back door almost to get through and say, actually, we want to do this. Can we do this? How do we put our bid in? I'm already on the, so I sign up to where they put their tenders. So the tender will come through to me when it appears. I don't think it has appeared. So I'm just sort of thinking there will be others who may not immediately appear to be our friends, but actually are and would want to be involved in a bigger project and might actually have the expertise to undertake the project. With all due respect, I mean, I don't have the expertise to undertake. I can do a business plan. I can do lots of things. Wouldn't know where to start with that. So, it's like, are there people out there we could gather in and say, look, we're really interested in doing something like this? And they have, if you like, sort of greater value with the council. So Act on Energy are really respected by Bromsgrove Council.
Yeah.
So if we could engage with them, then you might find that journey's a little bit easier.
As long as they see conflict of interest. But time is absolutely of the essence, actually, Marion, on this, because I have a feeling they've already chosen the company that they're going to work with. So we really need to get a move on.
Yeah, the thing is, though, it was, from what I understood from the council meetings I've listened in at, the whole project is to provide energy to the hospital and the schools, and is it Asda? In the first stage, it's not to provide energy for everywhere, and also the fact that it's going to cost £1 million a mile to put the pipework in. So it's quite a big project because they're moving the hot water from the aquifer. As I understand it, they're having that pumped through to heat the council house and what.
But Edwina, I feel that's just the limit of their ambition. That they're not looking further because they haven't any money to do anything with it. They haven't the will. This is why it's just in public buildings owned by the council.
Yeah.
So an initiative needs to be grabbed to expand it. There's no reason why not, possibly.
Yeah, but again, it's public
expand
money. It's public money being used, isn't it, for heating public buildings, but not having anything for the use of the general public.
And the council house is a long way away. It's only there are 2 schools that are close and lots of housing. Otherwise, it's all this expensive pipework.
Well, I thought the point of bringing the private company in was that it was going to be almost like a PFI. Is that not true?
Yeah.
That there isn't enough money, public money. There will be some grants, absolutely. But I think they're wanting some private money in as well.
Yeah. I don't know, because we've been cut out of the loop. Obviously, we got our group got, you know, we got cut out of the thing with the climate working group. So we only know what we found. We learned last year really, and nothing more recent.
We don't really know in the climate working group either.
No.
Gary, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that time's getting on. I'm going to have to go. I can smell my dinner wafting through from the next room. Other people have got a meeting to go to in 5 minutes. I can see in the chat that we're talking about meeting at Millfield Social Club to take this forward. I don't think there's any very concrete things we can say, right, this is the obvious next thing to do other than to agree to meet up. So what I'll do is I will keep this WhatsApp group going. People can leave if they don't have any further interest in it, but you can invite other people into it. I'll give it a new name. I'll think of what, just maybe Community Climate Action or something like that. But I'll keep it going as just a vehicle for, you know, doing a poll for where we're going to meet next and what our priorities are, so we can have little bits of chat about that. And are you happy? You can ignore it half the time, Jules, but would you be happy to kind of stay in the group and give us little bits of mentoring or advice if you if you can have a glance at it every now and again?
Yeah, I'm happy to stay in there. If you need anything specific, let me know. But yeah, I just want to say thanks to everyone that's given of their time on a weekday evening to come and listen to what we're doing. So really appreciate it, everyone. And
thank you.
Well, thank you,
Really
Jules.
interesting.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Jules.
Thank you, Jules.
And thank you, Jerry.
right.
Yeah, for organising.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry, and thanks everyone. I'm going to go now, so I'll probably draw the meeting to a close. But I'm still on the WhatsApp, so if you've got any burning questions, let me know.
Lovely.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much,
Brilliant.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye.